who is going to make the Vikings 53-man roster? Right now, we're in the doldrums. We're between mandatory minicamp and the report date for training camp, which is about 4 weeks away. So let's talk about the future. Since we last did a projection, there have been some changes. We're going to talk about who each player is, why they made the team, and why some surprising ones didn't. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. My name is Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner, he is producer Dave. And we are here to talk about who I project as of right now to make the Minnesota Vikings 53-man roster. Now, there's some interesting caveats here. One, there will probably be anywhere from 2 to, let's say 5 players that I'm going to be wrong on. It's at least at this point in the offseason. There's a lot of different things, and we probably have at least 1 or 2 players that aren't even on the Vikings 90-man roster right now who are going to end up on the final 53. It happens often. Remember a couple years ago, we traded for Ross Blacklock and Jalen Reagor. Well, that kind of stuff can happen. The Vikings can also trade away players. Remember, the likes of Vidarian Lowe have gotten traded away right before final cutdown. So there's some interesting movement that can still happen, but we can only go with what we know right now. What we know right now is the Minnesota Vikings 90-man roster. And it's at 91 because of the international pathway player that is punter Oscar Chapman, who is an Australian. And those elements of that 91-man roster is we can only kind of go based off of that. So I'm not going to predict any trades. I'm not going to predict any of that. It's just, hey, these are our guys. So who's going to make the team and who's not? And that's kind of how we're going to go about it. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing good for this Monday afternoon or evening.
No, I feel the same way. I got Dave, I don't know if you know this about me, but I am not handy. I am not like what you would call super savvy with power tools. But
that's why you need to call Norsefius.
The what?
That's why you need to call Norsefius in those occasions to help walk you through those things.
Oh, but you know what I did? I bought a bunch of hooks and I installed them all throughout my garage. And we're actually going to Menards tonight because I need some super heavy duty ones to hang up my Vikings cornhole boards. And they're very, 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 very nice. But they also weigh like 30 pounds. And I really don't want to have them on the ground. I want to have them hanging up at least just a little bit. So we're going to do that. And the fact that I did all that, well, let's just say that's a pretty impressive feat. I'm not that kind of handy guy. But my garage has a lot more space now. Oh, absolutely. I was listening to, I've been getting really into the Canadian Football League, Dave. As most of you know, I am just a football junkie and degenerate. And let me tell you, the Canadian game is really fun. I honestly, I find it more fun and entertaining than the NFL and college football. They're different. Like the skill in the NFL is significantly better, but only having 3 downs, you have a 12th guy. You can have 3 or 4 guys moving at like toward the line of scrimmage on the snap and the wider field. And plus, Dave, you can score 1 point, a rouge. Like if you miss a field goal and kick it through the back of the end zone, Dave, you get a point. If you get a touchback on a punt, you get a point. Like that kind of stuff rules to me. Like it's so different and fun and unique, but we're not here to talk about my newfound love of the Canadian Football League. Go Blue Bombers, by the way. We're here to talk about
Did you watch the UFL championship this weekend?
I had it on for a little bit, but by the time I flipped it on, the game was already over. I was watching. Let's see, what game was it? At that time, I was watching the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the Hamilton Tiger Cats. It was a 28-23 game. It was a very good one. So I missed most of it, but that's okay. Let's talk about this team. There are going to be some.
But first, I want to ask the viewers: am I sounding as loud as Tyler? We're getting complaints again that I'm not sounding. I'm coming in low over YouTube. I've got it cranked up right now. It's bothering me. But am I sounding equal in volume to Tyler?
Well, I'll tell you, you sound really nice and clear in my headphones, but I know that's not exactly the point, because you sound good to you too, and it's about what's going out to YouTube. But what will be really funny is all the weird algorithm changes and stuff that we've had with like Facebook. Is it that it was Facebook that was doing this? So I would laugh very hard if that continues to be an issue. But hey, it looks like it sounds good. We'll take that. Let's get started. Let's talk about, we're going to just go from quarterback and go all the way through offense and then defense and then the specialist. So we are going to have a little bit of fun. Oh, biscuits. I pulled up the wrong article. There we go. Easy fix. Quarterback. 3 guys make the team. And guess what? JJ McCarthy doesn't. I'm just kidding. He's the starter. JJ McCarthy, Sam Howell, and UDFA Max Brosmer make the team. Brett Rippon does not. I'm still convinced that Kevin O'Connell is going to want to have a developmental guy, and I believe he thinks that he can get Rippon on the practice squad, which would be a somewhat of a shift from last year, where he wanted Rippon on the team because they had to play 4 quarterbacks last year. I think a year removed, that philosophy might change, because I think he was more of a compensation, not a panic move, but more of a recency bias move. And what Brosmer has with the tool set, like, he's a little too conservative. He's probably never going to be a full-time starter in the NFL and all that stuff. But his skill set translates directly to how Kevin O'Connell likes to play football. And he was arguably the best passer on 3rd down last year in college football. Just those 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, throw over the middle, pop it, boom. Brosmer has that in him. He's got some good arm talent. And those factors are really interesting when it comes to development, because you have to have something to develop. You can't just, like, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, if the Vikings were to bring him in, you're not developing Aaron Rodgers. Right now, you're probably not developing Brett Rippon. So having the 3rd guy who has potential, whereas Rippon just kind of is what he is, I think could be more enticing to a guy like Kevin O'Connell, which is why I have Brosmer in. Plus, he was getting some really positive reviews when the coaching staff was talking about him publicly, and I think that matters. Now, it's not everything, but there is stuff with that matters. And I'm really intrigued to kind of see how he continues to grow and develop, especially, Dave, with the advent of the preseason. I think that's going to really tell us a lot about where this quarterback room is. Obviously, McCarthy's number 1. Howell has a chance to lose that backup job to Rippon, but especially because they're really not pot committed to Howell, nor are they financially. If Howell just flat out stinks all offseason, they can cut him, and all they did was drop 30 spots in round 2 or round 5. I mean, like, that's fine. Not the end of the world. So I'm really intrigued to see how everything manifests with that group. Next group, Dave, we have running back. And this is interesting. I still have Ty Chandler making the team, but we're not going to know too much about the depth of this running back room until we can see Trey Stewart and Xavier Scott play special teams. Because even though I think Trey Stewart's going to end up being a better runner than Ty Chandler, that 3rd running back needs to play special teams. And Chandler is a very, very good special teamer. So sometimes I think we get a little too Madden brained as a collective whole, or, oh, this player's better. But sometimes what you do versus how good you are as an overall player can be completely different. And having a player that can play special teams at a high level matters more than just having a really good player. I mean, we're talking about running back 3. We're not talking about the starter here. So that special teams versatility is going to matter a lot. A lot. And if Stewart and Scott prove that they can't do special teams, I don't think Chandler is going to have any worry about his job unless there's a running back that gets cut or they make a third consecutive trade for Cam Akers, who is now a New Orleans Saint. So that'll be something to monitor. Anything from you, Dave, on these first 2 position groups, who I feel are pretty chalk right now?
I'm not so sure about Chandler, but like you said, we got to see what he does on, or what the other 2 do on special teams, because they're going to make the squad via special teams.
And I think that's the big question, because special teams, what you do in the NFL, a lot of those guys in college aren't playing that kind of special teams. So you really don't have an ability to actually get an evaluation from that standpoint. You have to see it to believe it. You can't, there probably isn't much special teams data from them, or film for that matter, from their final year of college. And Xavier Scott spent some time last year in the Vikings practice squad, so he's a little bit of a different case. But you have to be able to know, I know that this guy can do it, because Chandler's like the personal protector, the last line of defense to be able to get a hat on a hat to prevent a punt from being blocked. Big responsibility. So
now, as Rob said, and you talked about prior to this, there's going to be a whole bunch of players released towards the beginning of the season when they do through cuts, and all 3 of those guys may be gone and they bring in somebody else.
Yeah. I think what's also interesting is, and I'm guilty of this, just like everybody else is, we talk a lot about potentially getting guys off cuts. Like an average of like only 6 to 8 players are claimed off of waivers with those initial cuts. So even though, oh, we can go get this guy, I'm too scared of losing him to this team, there's like a 99.9% chance that guy is still going to be available to sign on your practice squad. And I think we overvalue that element, even though that element is 100% prevalent, because it's just, you don't want to expose a player and potentially lose them. There is a risk there, but it just doesn't happen nearly at the frequency of the vibes surrounding that conversation. So that's an interesting element. I do find Northview's comment very funny. The patience is running out on Chandler, which is very funny because he doesn't have any. So I got a nice little giggle out of that. But yeah, Chandler, if he makes the team, it's not because he can run the football well. It's because of special teams. But that's where I said earlier, I think we get a little too Madden brain. We're like, oh, we're thinking of this guy, what he does on offense. It's not about what he does on offense. That's not why he's still here. Because if it was why he was still here, they would not have traded for Jordan Mason. It would be an Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler backfield. It's a special teams position. And he's good at it. Very good at it. So I'm very intrigued to kind of see how that position group grows throughout the offseason. I don't know really much about what Xavier Scott can do on the football field. I want to see him too. Because we got him toward the end of the season last year. Didn't get a chance to actually see him play. So I think preseason will be really good to kind of see what he looks like. Wide receiver. Every year the Vikings keep 6. And I think it's relatively chalk. And one of the interesting caveats with this position group, Dave, is Rondale Moore. Until proven otherwise, he's on PUP for me. Because he did have a torn ACL last August, but it was described as a brutal knee injury, meaning a lot more damage than just the ACL. And he's still not back. He's still not really doing much of anything. So until he's cleared, I'm projecting him to be on PUP. And if he is end up cleared, I think he's going to end up getting a roster spot. It's not a guarantee, but I do think he gets one. So right now, he is not on my final 53 because he's on the PUP list. So my wide receivers are Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, Ty Felton. Pretty chalk for the first four. Then I have Lucky Jackson and Tim Jones. Lucky Jackson, I think this might actually be the year he makes the team. He's proven that he can be a valuable contributor on special teams. He's shown some actual ability during like training camp and preseason to be a really good pass catcher. Now, I'm talking really good for like a wide receiver 4/5. I don't think he's never going to be like an Adam Thielen kind of breakout guy, but I do think he's a valuable asset to have on your roster. And Tim Jones caught quite a few balls for the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, and he's a Trent Sherfield 1-to-1 replacement, special teams, depth wide receiver. So I think he's going to have to either one, just crater out when it comes to special teams acumen, or when it comes to Jones, somebody just needs to step up and just whip his butt when it comes to that special team stuff, because that's why he was signed. He was signed to be a special teamer. And having actual ability as a wide receiver becomes a huge plus. But he wasn't signed for his wide receiver ability. So I think because those depth guys have to play special teams, I don't know what Felton's special teams acumen is going to be at this point. I don't know if he has any. It's harder when you're like a 180-pound wide receiver. Like, he's rail thin and he's very fast. But if you get a little contact on him, you completely knock him off his trajectory. He doesn't have that play strength to play through that. So that can be a huge
return kicks for Maryland.
Yeah, but I'm not talking returning though. I'm talking the other stuff. I'm talking coverage teams. I'm talking
and all that stuff.
Gunning. Yeah, because those are the kind of roles that he would have to play. And one of the reasons why a lot of depth wide receivers aren't like Odell Beckham Jr. is never going to be a wide receiver 4. Why? He's not going to play special teams. Like, I'm not saying he's above special teams. Not a single person in the league is above playing special teams. Now, I would never want my full-time starting quarterback to be my holder. We all remember Tony Romo, but that's also a different case because he became the starter based off of an injury replacement. But everybody is capable of playing special teams as far as what your role is. It's not just for the back end of the roster. Urban Meyer gets a lot of grief for a lot of reasons, and he deserves nearly all of it. But I think what's really interesting about his teams, having been a big Florida Gator fan, everybody played special teams. Players used to fight to play special teams. Starters, like all American and all conference wide receivers, were punt gunners. Like, special teams is a good and really important thing when it comes to the football game. But can Ty Felton do any of those roles? I have my doubts that he can because of his play strength, because of his frame. Now, returning is a different one. But with these depth positions, it's more about, can you be a gunner? And I have questions that he can be a gunner. So we'll see. I'm not going to say it's a for sure he can't, but I have serious doubts, which is why Jones, I think, he's not a lock to make the team, but I feel comfortable with it. They gave him a $500,000 signing bonus or $500,000 guaranteed money, which I realize isn't a lot of money, but it's significant enough where a team's going to have to think twice about, like, do we really want to give up $500,000 to keep Lucky Jackson? The answer is probably not. I will say one player to keep an eye on, 2 of them. Dante Fleming, the UDFA wide receiver from Tulane, I think is really interesting from like a punt gunner and returner standpoint. And Deshaun Jones, last year's UDFA out of Maryland, who was the number 1 player for the Vikings in guaranteed money. Him and Gabe Murphy were tied. He got a little bit of hype from the beat and the coaching staff for his performance. So that's a player to keep an eye on too.
What about what we've been hearing about Silas Bolden?
Bolden, to me, is a punt return only. And I struggle to have a guy like that on the team. And which is why, like, some of these guys, like a Fleming, I think could be a more versatile role. I think he could be a gunner. He could be kick coverage. Silas Bolden is like as small as Odie. I think he would be a little too limited. So he's going to have to, in my opinion, be so good at punt return that you have to keep him on your roster. Like how Najee Thompson a couple years ago was so good on special teams cover units that you had to keep him. He forced you to keep him. I think Bolden's going to be in that similar boat where I think a player like Fleming who has punt return ability, but I believe he can also be a gunner and play on coverage teams. That versatility is going to overrule just being a punt returner unless that punt returner becomes so good. Like, obviously he's the biggest outlier in NFL history. Devin Hester couldn't do anything but return kicks. Nothing. But he's also a Hall of Famer because he was so good at returning kicks. He was able to keep jobs for years, and they kept trying to make him a receiver. But he was bad at it. So
I thought Devin played on the defense.
He did in college, not in the NFL. Which I'm surprised they never gave him a shot at corner, considering he played that in college. But I don't know. I'm not an NFL team, I guess. But I use that even though it's an extreme example because like Cordell Patterson will have a job as long as kick return remains relevant until he's like actually cooked. Because Devin Hester is the best punt returner in NFL history. Cordell Patterson is the best kick returner, kickoff in NFL history. Like, bar none. They're both so good at those responsibilities that as long as both stay relevant, they'll have jobs. Yeah, so Rob makes a point that it's $1.3 million in cap savings if they cut Tim Jones. It's less about the cap savings. It's more about the fact that it would be $500,000 lost. Because in that cap savings, so if they save $1.3 million and they give it to Silas Bolden, $840,000 immediately gets taken off of that. So then all of a sudden, it's not 1.3, it's only a $500,000 savings. Is that worth it for the versatility that Tim Jones provides versus the versatility Bolden doesn't? And those are the conversations that are happening in the room when you are finalizing that roster. And I'm not going to tell you that you have to keep Tim Jones, but I'm telling you, sometimes $500,000 could be the difference between keeping Tim Jones versus a guy like Bolden. Because you've already committed. And if all things are equal, keep the guy you've already given money to. So those are going to be interesting conversations, but I do think it's an interesting discussion point. Cause and Effect has a question. Are we going to wait until the start of training camp to add another corner? If so, who might that be? Look, we don't have to agree, but I think it's been made abundantly clear. The Vikings are content at cornerback. They are completely fine running out the group that they have and not having anybody else added to that room. Now, what I find interesting is how soon into training camp do they make an addition if they start to feel uncomfortable? That's going to be interesting to watch. And I think Stephon Gilmore was signed about 2 weeks into camp, or like right after they broke official training camp, they signed him like mid-August. Now Mekhi Blackman got hurt the first day of training camp. They signed Bobby McCain real quick. So I'm intrigued by that sense, but look, I don't think they're getting another cornerback in the room unless it's, oh, we cut this guy, so we're just signing a guy that you've never heard of at corner. Maybe that's a thing. So yeah, I don't believe that they're going to sign like a Jair Alexander or a Jalen Ramsey. Now,
which is different from what you said a week ago.
I thought that they would sign Jair Alexander because for a few reasons. And I think my argument was less about the Vikings aren't comfortable, but I thought that it would make sense from multiple standpoints, including how he plays and the fact that he's going to have a chip on his shoulder and might take a little less and go beat the Packers. It would not shock me if we hear reports that Jair's camp contacted the Vikings. Now, it was reported by Doogie that the Vikings don't have any interest in signing him. But it made sense for them to sign him. So it was interesting. I also think it's fair to point out that last Monday was when Jair Alexander got released. And then we heard from Brian Flores the next day, just spouting off all kinds of things about his cornerback room, completely affirming everything that we believed that they thought. So, like, if they ended up signing one, I would be surprised at this point. But I thought Jair made way more sense than Jalen Ramsey, all things considered, including the contract. Because Jair maybe signs for like 1 year, $5 million with like $5 million in game day like roster bonuses. Because hey, if you play 17 games, you get $1 million. If you play 2 games, you get like 600,000. And that'd be the risk he'd have to take to make excess money because he's been so hurt. He's missed 34 of the last 68 games. That's bad. But the Vikings have made it clear they're very comfortable where they're at right now with their cornerback room, whether we like it or not. And I think they'll end up being fine. Corner's a weak links position, and I believe in Isaiah Rodgers. I like that signing. That was a really good upside swing. If he plays like a good cornerback too, the Vikings are potentially getting like $8 million in surplus value on that contract. That's a lot of money. Those kind of deals are how teams can win Super Bowls. They don't often hit, but when you hit them, it becomes a humongous asset to making that kind of run.
Yep, all right. Very well. Let's move on to one of my favorite positions, the tight end.
Tight end, I think, is pretty clear right now, but I do have questions. TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver, Gavin Bartholomew are your top 3. Hawkinson and Oliver are guarantees. The only way that they're not is if they go on PUP or injured reserve. Bartholomew is going to have the edge for now until we get more information, and that more information is going to come from training camp. What is fascinating to me was Bartholomew did not participate in mandatory minicamp. That gives Ben Urasek and Bryson Nesbitt a leg up on being able to get that job. Personally, I think Giovanni Ricci, who the Vikings signed last Tuesday, was just like an extra depth body because Bartholomew was hurt. I don't think he's got much of a chance at all. I think they're going to roll into the season with one of the rookies. And being a 6th round pick versus UDFA gives you a major advantage because one, you have guaranteed money, but it's funny because Bartholomew actually has less guaranteed money than Urasek does because base salary is not guaranteed for a tight end for like a 6th round pick, but base salary was guaranteed for Urasek. So that's an interesting one, but Urasek would, like, if he stays the whole year on the practice squad, it's a wash. It doesn't matter. They're basically guaranteeing him a full year of practice squad salary. So it's Bartholomew until we hear otherwise. But I will say Urasek was once projected to be a top 50 pick. And people don't forget that kind of stuff. That's why 5-star recruits are almost always taken, even if they're not that good. Because a 5-star recruit, I can fix him. Coaches love to fix guys. And they like guys with high upside, even if they've never reached it, because they're like, I can get him there. Sometimes you can, most of the time you can't. So that's an interesting one. Tight end is probably going to be the funnest battle to watch this year for that reason. We just don't know. Offensive line, we're going to kind of skim through because right now there's really not many questions. Offensive tackle, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill, Justin SKOL, and Walter Rouse. Just 4 tackles. I do think Logan Brown has a chance to beat out Walter Rouse because Rouse just is not a good lateral mover. I think what could really help Rouse is showing that he can kick inside and he can be solid on the inside. That can be a really big difference as far as who makes the team and who doesn't. Is it a guarantee? Oh, absolutely not. But just something to be mindful of. Versatility does matter in these situations. Interior offensive line, 5 guys right now. Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, Donovan Jackson, Blake Brando, Michael Juergens. Joe Huber, the UDFA out of Wisconsin, is an interesting one to kind of keep your eye on. Vershon Lee, who they just signed I believe last Friday, has experience at center, started 13 games last year for South Carolina. So they are looking at different options for backup center because I don't believe they trust Jurgens. So just something to be mindful of, something to keep an eye on. I don't think there's many question marks right now as for who's going to make the team because I think we have too many questions about those super depth guys. There's not a lot of really exciting, I think this guy could be really good potential other than Logan Brown. And Brown didn't get drafted, even though he had a 4th round grade on the consensus board, was because he beat up a teammate at Wisconsin and got kicked off the team. So, and Rob says, will it be Logan Brown versus wide receiver 6? I don't think so because the Vikings had kept 6 wide receivers every year. And the one year they didn't, they only had 4 on the initial 53, but by week 1, they had 6. So I think that they're going to continue to keep 6, but I do think Brown could be going up against somebody like, hey, maybe it's the 6th defensive lineman, the 5th edge rusher. That's going to be an interesting one to look at because of how last year's team was constructed versus this year's team are going to be different. Not because year over year it's always different, but because of who they have now in the defensive line. They don't have to rely on playing 5 edge rushers like 20 plus snaps a game because of the NASCAR package. They may not have to use the NASCAR package at all this year. And I think those things matter a little bit more than maybe we initially thought. A guy like Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, those guys are going to eat up a lot of snaps. So maybe you're only playing 3 edge rushers and that 4th one barely gets in or is a healthy scratch. So I think those things are interesting things to keep an eye on. How they play. And Dave, another interesting thing to keep an eye on is the NBA Finals on Underdog Fantasy. I've been doing a lot of extra fun with Underdog Fantasy. I've been doing the extender gimmick, which if you started at game 1 like I did, there's a 50% bonus, and now it's up to 80% for, I believe, tonight's game. It's either tonight or Tuesday. I cannot remember, but either way, I can get 80% more winnings because I've been playing every single game. And that's all you have to do. 2-day players in your lineup, higher or lower than whatever the stat is, and you have a chance to win up to 1,000 times your initial bet. All you have to do is be in one of those states, have a little extra fun, and you know what? Maybe you want to bet on Shohei Ohtani tonight. Why? Ohtani's pitching for the first time in nearly 2 years because of Tommy John surgery. Maybe you'll like to sprinkle a little bit on those strikeouts, see if you can have a little extra fun. It just provides a little extra. I did some CFL stuff over the weekend. Go Blue Bombers, baby. And all you have to do is that and use promo code Forno, Forno, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash or bonus credits on your first deposit. But remember, it's fun. If you are having a little too much of it, 1-800-GAMBLER.
Don't worry, Rob. I like your thoughts. So is everybody else.
Absolutely. All right. Now, Dave, let's go to the defensive side of the football. I have major questions about how this is going to be structured for the reasons I kind of just talked about. Are we going to see them structure this defense a little differently because of what they have in the defensive line now? They may only keep 4 edge rushers because of that. And that could mean an extra safety. They may also only keep 4 safeties because they might not play 3 safeties for 90% of the snaps. So I'm intrigued to see how everything balances out. Flores has brought a different flavor every single time that he's had his teams take the field. It was with Bengal Hawk initially, last year's the NASCAR package, continuing to use those 3 safety looks. And this year, well, now that you have pass rushing defensive tackles, how is that going to change it? What is going to change? I think one of those things could be how they structure this defensive front. But right now, I do have 6 defensive linemen making it. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Harrison Phillips, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, Levi Drake Rodriguez, and Jalen Redmond. My personal theory is I think Jalen Redmond is probably going to be, for lack of a better term, the starter over Javon Hargrave. But Hargrave is going to get the crucial downs, the money downs, third down, obvious pass rush situations. And then you're going to have Redmond play a lot of the dirty downs, the run downs. And that's a way to keep Hargrave fresh. And it's not to say that Redmond is better than Hargrave or more valuable, but it allows you to use Hargrave as in his more valuable role, which is rushing the passer and getting that quick penetration as a 3-tech or a 4-eye. That's what you want to use him for. And having a guy like Redmond play those rundowns can make a big difference. One player that you did not hear was Taki Taimani. And here was my thought process. I think Taki Taimani as a true nose is a better player than Levi Drake Rodriguez. However, I think Rodriguez has real pass rush upside, and they've been getting him in at nose tackle. I think that they'll prioritize the versatility of Levi Drake Rodriguez over just the pure nose ability of Taki Taimani, if all things are equal, which is why I went with Rodriguez, because I do think that there's pass rush upside. He's got athleticism, he's got really good burst, and he's got a motor that runs hotter than a volcano. So I think that element makes things very interesting when we're having this conversation. As a pure nose, I do think Taimani's a better player, but he's also a very limited player, which is why a lot of teams do not prioritize nose tackles. And a guy who played as well as Taimani did last year was an undrafted free agent. But when it comes to rushing the passer, he's giving you nothing. And I think Rodriguez can give you something. Probably only get like a pressure percentage of like 7 or 8%, give you like 3 to 4 sacks a year. But when you're a guy who also has to be in like 315, 320 pounds and play the run that well, being able to give you that is a huge benefit. Like the reason why we were talking about training for Dexter Lawrence last year is because he's a nose tackle that also has like a 20 to 25% pressure rate, which is like elite for an edge rusher, let alone a defensive tackle. Like that's a rarest of the rare. That's like when we would have conversations about like Reggie White, that's stuff Reggie White would do. And if anytime you get a comparison to Reggie White, who in my opinion is the best defensive player to have ever played football, you can take Lawrence Taylor, you can take Aaron Donald. I will take Reggie White 10 out of 10. And that's not an insult to either of those guys. Phenomenal. But White was that good. He was so good that Chris Carter got a sack. How? Reggie White threw him into Warren Moon, like 5 yards away. Just, Dave, you remember that play. It was a Sunday night game on TNT nonetheless. The Vikings beat the Packers on a last-second drive. But I digress.
Reggie White was special.
Mm-hmm. Special.
He went to the wrong team. Second time around.
He really did. Man, he would have been so good. Imagine him and John Randall and Chris Dolman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. That sounds so good. So let's address this with cause and effect about Brian Flores potentially getting an extension. Ben Gessling reported over the weekend when Wes Phillips got his extension, he did explicitly say that they want to sign Flores to an extension. That hasn't happened yet. Will it happen? We'll find out. One of the interesting things is Flores, it would be silly to not sign an extension unless he explicitly would like to leave the team next year. Because if he gets a promotion, that extension doesn't matter anyways. But if he doesn't sign one, then that would tell me that he would be open to being a defensive coordinator somewhere else. And that would be his prerogative. That would be his choice. But if he doesn't sign one, that's where my brain will go. He wants to be a defensive coordinator elsewhere. Because a contract does not matter when you get a promotion. There might be a small buyout. Like, I don't know, like a couple $100,000, which is a lot of money. But in NFL terms, it's pennies. Like, you're
not necessarily for coaches.
Well, if you have your guy at head coach, you'll pay a couple $100,000 buyout and it won't matter. Like, who cares?
Right.
Like,
but we're talking assistant coaches. And if a couple $100,000 may be significant to him. Now, he's supposedly making, what, $4 million a year? So it is a percentage.
I'm saying that the new team would pay that buyout, not Flores.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I mean, Flores might be one to pay that buyout because instead of like, I think he's making over $1 million. His head coaching job probably going to pay him $5 million. So even if he has a $200,000 buyout, he's still going to net profit like $3 million. I'll take that. But I say all that because essentially assistant contracts don't mean anything unless you want to be an assistant for another team. So that one will be intriguing. But I do want to point out.
But we hear he loves it here in Minnesota. So
he loves it.
His family loves it. Everything. Hey, establish himself as the best DC in the league. Mm-hmm. I'm all for it.
Yeah. So a couple interesting names to keep an eye on. Alexander Williams, friend of the show, Kevin Fielder absolutely loves. Former Ohio State player, transferred to, I think it was Tennessee Chattanooga. I might have my Tennessee FCS schools wrong. Might be East Tennessee State. I can't remember, but he loves him. Elijah Williams from Morgan State is one that I'm keeping an eye on. A very similar profile and story to Javon Hargrave. Williams, 33 sacks at the HBCU FCS level. And while production does not mean everything when you're translating to the NFL, it's not a mistake that he had that kind of production. So can you develop and harness that into becoming a consistent NFL player? That's a guy I'm keeping an eye on hard. Plus, he's that UDFA that earned a roster spot because of rookie minicamp. He didn't have one. And coming in and earning a roster spot gives you a leg up on a lot of UDFAs because you had to outperform a lot of people to get that roster spot. And that gives you that leg up over other players. So I'm not going to say he makes the team. He's obviously not on my list here, but it's something to monitor. And I think it's not a nothing burger. Edge rusher, I have 5. This is a group that could go down 1 because of style of play. If they do play a lot more defensive tackles, there will be less of a need to have a 5th or 6th edge rusher. I still have it at 5, but it's just something to monitor. Maybe this one goes down 1. All right. So Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, Bo Richter, who I'm grouping here and not linebacker, and Tyler Batty. No Gabe Murphy. So let me kind of explain why. Even though Gabe Murphy was guaranteed a lot of money last year, and he played well in the one game that he really got to play, he does have a major deficiency with arm length. And you were last year's prize UDFA. You have a year. Now you have to show that you've taken a step forward. And what's interesting about Batty is he does not have a length issue. He's not the athlete that Murphy is, but he's incredibly strong at the point of attack, and he's really good and solid and smart run defender. And because of those things, with how this edge room is currently constructed, I could see him being, hey, we'll put him in for base downs. Like, play like 10 first and second downs a game. Give Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard a few extra snaps off. Like 3 to 5 snaps. Over the course of the year, that adds up to about 50 to 80 snaps off. And that can make a really big difference on a body when you're talking about playing in the National Football League. But I think his ability as a run defender is going to be his calling card in the league. And he's already got NFL strength despite being 275 pounds. He can play inside. He can play as like a 5 tech. So I think he'll end up making it because of those things. At a certain point, upside doesn't matter when you have a high floor, when you're having these conversations like a Murphy versus a Betty. I think Richter makes it because his special teams ability is really, really good. He does a lot of different things. He has experience on ball and off ball. He's kind of like a poor man's Andrew Van Ginkel, and he can do both. He played both extensively at Air Force, and I think that would be really interesting. I don't know if he'll end up getting many defensive snaps. I think he had like 9 or 10 last year. A lot of it just coming in like either garbage time or, hey, this guy was really hurt. Most of those snaps, I think, actually came against the Houston Texans when they were up 34-7. So that's kind of where I'm at with edge. But they could surprise us. And maybe Murphy does have something extra in the tank, and that arm deficiency just does not manifest the way that we think it's going to end up doing so. One interesting thing about him playing in college that will translate to the NFL, they lined him up inside and had his hand in the dirt against guards. Guards couldn't get their hands on him because he was so quick, and he was short enough at 6'1.5" where he could dip that shoulder and get underneath the arms of those guards, because guards and centers don't have long arms. And that's something you don't have to deal with when you play inside. So maybe they have a little bit of that in mind for him. But I think Batty is the kind of UDFA, plus he was the number one money getter from the Vikings. He's the kind of UDFA that the Vikings have traditionally liked. A high upside. I know what you're good at, and I can use what you're good at. He's essentially like Ivan Pace. I know you're good at these things. I can maximize you being good at those things. And then we can try and figure out the rest. If we don't figure it out, I still know you're really good at these things.
Speaking of Pace, did you see that post from PFF today?
You'll have to elaborate.
It was the one player on the team. What was it that for each team that's the most disappointing?
Oh, wasn't that a Dove Kleiman post?
It was.
Oh, yeah, he can be ignored 100%.
He's an idiot. And if Ivan Pace is the one player we have to worry about and everybody's better, we're freaking golden.
Hey, just remember, aggregators are bad. They bad faith things. They don't give proper context. And oftentimes they don't give proper credit. All aggregators are bad and should be ignored. Block them. Mute them. Do not engage with them. Curate lists so you have the people who actually write the things and bring the news, so then you can get it from them instead of aggregators who do not have your best intentions in mind. Aggregators are bad. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. All right, we have a few more positions left. Look, inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker is pretty simple. Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace, Jr., Eric Wilson, Kobe King. Asamoah, he has not stepped up at all as a defensive player. He should have, but he hasn't. And I think with Kobe King coming in, he can do a lot of the special team stuff that Asamoah does. I think he's gone, which is a dang shame. It looked like there was a lot of potential with him. Then there just wasn't. So that kind of stinks. But yeah, not a lot of mystery with inside linebacker. Cause and effect, we'll get there. We're going to talk about specialists last. Cornerback. This one has a surprise in it. Byron Murphy Jr., Isaiah Rodgers, Mekhi Blackman, Jeff Okudah, Dwight McGlothern, and Zamiah Vaughn. It's kind of interesting that I included McGlothern and Vaughn together because they're kind of the same player. They're tall, they're skinny, good ball skills, click and close. They're kind of the same archetype. They were both undervalued because of their size and physicality, and they both ended up undrafted. But it's that kind of style that Brian Flores likes to play. He's fine with you playing off, but you have to be able to read and react and get there quickly, which is where Byron Murphy Jr. does this really well. Mekhi Blackman showed that he could do it well. Isaiah Rodgers. And one of the reasons why, as we talked about earlier, I thought Jair Alexander would be a really nice fit for the Vikings because he's so good at playing off, playing patient, and exploding forward toward the football and attacking it while it's in the air. I think Vaughn has that ability. He's also a very willing tackler. But if he gets up in you and he gets his arms fully wrapped, you're done. But if he's just diving for arm tackles, he doesn't always have the play strength to bring those guys down. But it's a very interesting player because what he can do is really good, but the deficiencies might hinder him from ever being good because he's only like 180 pounds. And that's another thing. The Vikings are not afraid to sign and draft slender players. They don't care if you are rail thin. They don't care if you are slight because they know what you're good at and they can maximize those things. One of the things, like, a scout's job is to focus on what you're good at and what you're bad at and identifying those things and communicating it. A GM's job is to figure out what matters and what doesn't. A coach's job is to maximize the good. And with Vaughn, I think Flores can maximize the good to a high level, and he can be a contributing player at corner. Maybe not this year, but next year and beyond. And with cornerback being a weak link position, and I keep beating the drum, the 2021 Bengals, they did not have a single great corner, but they had 3 guys who were good. And that matters more than having one elite guy and one guy who gets picked on all the time. Because you just figure out, oh, he's against that guy, I'm just going to throw at him all day. And I think a guy like Vaughn could be a contributor. Ambry Thomas is another guy. I see there's some discussion about him in the chat. I don't know where he's at. He was healing from a broken arm. Yes, a broken arm. And then the 49ers waived him with a failed medical distinction, failed physical. So I don't know where he's at, but he's a good guy to have in this battle. I'm just not sure he makes it. That'll be an interesting one to watch for. Tavierre Thomas is more of a nickel, like a pure nickel, but he's got a lot of special teams experience. So if he doesn't make the team, it's going to be because other guys stepped up in a big way. So this is arguably a very, very good group to look at. Keenan Garber is also a hyper athlete out of Kansas State. Also doesn't really know how to play football yet. So he's got a long way to go from that sense. And Jeff Okudah. Delton asked about, well, could the Vikings move him to safety? I mean, maybe, but I don't think that's the plan. I see where your brain is working at, but I don't think that they'll move him to safety. It's that's more of the last resort. It's not like Jeff Okudah can play corner. He's an okay-ish corner. The biggest problem with Okudah is he's always hurt. Like, he's hurt a lot. And it's been a constant throughout his entire career. And I mean, he has a fully guaranteed contract, but it's like $2.3 million. So they believe he's going to make the team, but they also aren't convinced that he's going to be anything more than like cornerback 3 or 4. Or if you get him to play really well as cornerback 2, like we talked about with Rodgers, surplus value. Those are the kind of players where you can see surplus value. This is another one of like a failed first round pick that Kwesi's taking a chance on. Will it work? I don't know. But at just $2 million, 2.3, yeah, I'm okay taking that chance. I'm okay with that risk. Because I think it's a low risk proposition. Like $2.3 million isn't even 1% of the cap. Like, it's a pittance. And even if you get average cornerback 4 play, it's not really an overpay. It's fine. But corner is going to be an interesting one to parse out. McGlothern could end up not making the team. Same with Vaughn. Like, I think the top 4 of Murphy, Rodgers, Blackman, and Okudah are safe. After that, it's between 1, 2, and 3 spots, depending on how safety shapes up. Like, this is a group where if you have versatility with a player, like Jay Ward played a lot of corner last training camp. Like, maybe they keep a 7th, but probably not. It's probably 5 or 6. So we'll see how that pairs out. 2 positions to go, and then we'll wrap up. Safety, I think it's just 4. And there's only 5 safeties on the roster right now. So this could be a spot where they add because they just cut Bubba Bolden after mandatory minicamp. Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson, and Jay Ward. I don't know how often they're going to play safeties this year. But I feel pretty good saying it won't be as much as they did the last 2 years. I don't know who to give credit to this, but I think Brian Flores has done such a good job of using what he has. And now we're starting to see this group like focus into what he wants. And he wanted Theo Jackson. I don't think he wanted to keep Cam Bynum, but he maximized Cam Bynum. I think he wants a guy that's a little closer to Theo Jackson. How much are these guys going to play? One of the bigger question marks heading into the 2025 season for this team. What are the safeties going to look like, and how are they going to be used? Plus, Metellus' contract extension. How do you pay him? How do you quantify what to pay him? Versatility makes it very difficult to quantify how much you're worth because there is not a lot to compare you to, which is why I think it's one of the reasons why it's not done yet. Lastly, specialists. I really don't think anything changes.
Darren and I talked about Metellus' contract yesterday, by the way.
What was your conclusion?
Well, that I think it was Dugan was the best comparable safety for the Ravens, I think it is. And my conclusion, I guess 10 to 14
you mean Kyle
million. Duggar, that's it. That would be 10 to 14 million per year. Some people have it as high as 15.
Going into this offseason, only 6 safeties were paid $15 or more million per year. Now, 10 safeties are paid that. Cam Bynum is 10th at 15. 15th is, I think, probably his best comparison. Julian Love from the Seattle Seahawks, he makes $11 million. And 20th is Andre Sisco, who just signed a deal with the Jets. He's making 8.5. Now, here's where things get tricky because he plays a lot in the slot. The number one slot corner is also the 21st ranked corner. That's Kyler Gordon at 13.33. The 29th corner is Kenny Moore at $10 million, but he's the 5th best slot corner. So slot corner is going to devalue that proposition a little bit more because I think he's just a really good versatile player, but I wouldn't think of him as this really good slot corner. So to me,
and then there's linebacker.
Linebacker, I don't think he's a good linebacker at all. I think he did some of that out of necessity. I don't think they want him there at all. That's my read on it. When I looked at it, I got $11.5 million per year over 3 years, but because they're paying him so like a lower amount, what I ended up doing was guaranteeing over 2/3 of that contract, $23.5 million fully guaranteed, because that's a way to be like, hey, we know you're worth X amount of money, but it's really hard to quantify like the total. So for a lower max value, we'll give you more guaranteed. That's the way I think the contract negotiations will go. But anywhere between that 10 and 14 million range that you mentioned, Dave, I think makes sense. But is is Josh Metellus the 10th best safety in the league? Like, when you're having that conversation, where does he land? Because I think that's an interesting part of it too. Just as a safety, how good is he? And that's where the versatility element, I think, is really going to bite him, because I think it becomes harder to quantify him within the context of those different position groups.
See, I compared him to Taysom Hill and how Taysom Hill was for the Saints. Do you pay him as a quarterback? Do you pay him as a wide receiver? Do you pay him as, a fullback? How did you pay him? And it's because of that versatility, they had to come up with, a special type of, you put him in where he ranks roughly in each position, give it a percentage, and then percentage of how many plays he plays that, and there's where he fits, and then give him a percentage above that for cap inflation, and then give him a percentage above that for how much it means to, in our case, the Vikings defense, or in New Orleans' case, their offense, or whomever Duggar plays, he's more versatile as well. And it's how much you mean. Now you compare that to what would he get if he went off to play for another team that wants him just as a safety. And it's probably going to be a little bit higher than just what is as a safety. But that's how I computed it. And I figured 10 to 14 is where it's going to come in.
I had a different kind of process, because I actually think what he'll get paid lower than what he is as a safety, because the other things that he does are less valuable than safety, which is kind of odd to say. Nickel cornerback is one of the more important positions on a football team, yet financially it is not a valuable position, which is very interesting, the dichotomy of that, because like the best slot corner is the 21st paid cornerback in the National Football League. The value of that position has not caught up when it comes to compensation. And
no, but
Tyler
it's starting to rise.
It's not rising up to a level where we can consider it more valuable, though, as far as a compensation factor, because Kenny Moore got that $10 million like 3 years ago. It's gone up, I guess 30%, whereas the cornerback market in those same 3 years has gone up 50. Right.
But part of that, I think, also comes to the old thinking of 3-4, 4-3 defenses versus going that most teams now play nickel.
I think that conversation in itself, I don't think resonates as much as we think it should, as far as the compensation, because we've been at a nickel league for like 8 years now. Like, unless you were Mike Zimmer and playing Ben Gedding, even Ben Gedding was only playing 30% of the snaps as like that 4-3 weak side linebacker. He wasn't playing a lot. We've been in nickel league for so long, but that price hasn't come up. So I actually think that hinders his value as far as the contract. And I'm like, I don't say this because I think Metellus should get less. I think when you're in the room and you're the Vikings and you're trying to get value, I think that's where it comes up. Be like, well, the number one paid slot corner is getting $13.33 million a year. And as a slot corner, you aren't as good as that guy. So I can't pay you that. And that's where I think some of those contract negotiations get a little fuzzy, because it'd be like, well, as a safety, I'm worth that. But you don't just play safety. You play a bunch of slot corner. On your defensive snaps, you're about half at slot corner, and you're not the best. So I can't pay you like the best. That sets a bad precedent. And that's where some of those negotiations can go off the rail. But the good thing for these conversations is,
whereas his agent is going to argue, yeah, but he has the versatility to do both. Whereas if you're wanting the best safety or the best slot, you're buying two people. I'm giving it to you in one.
I don't think that matters when it comes down to brass tacks, but I do think you're right, and that's going to be the argument, because what Adolfo Mensa is going to say is, I'm setting a bad precedent by paying you the best slot corner when you play half of your snaps at slot corner. That doesn't make sense to me, because then when I'm going into future negotiations, that's going to weaken my bargaining power. He's not going to say that out loud, but in the back of your mind, I think that's where the conversation is. The good news is they're doing this deal with Drew Rosenhaus, and they've done a lot of business recently with Rosenhaus. The Josh Oliver extension, the Andrew Van Ginkel extension, the Aaron Jones extension, all Drew Rosenhaus. I believe Jonathan Allen might also be Drew Rosenhaus. They've a lot of business with him. So the more contracts you do, the better communication you have, the more you understand the person that's sitting across from you. And hopefully that makes a difference in getting this deal done. I just have concerns that it's going to get done because of all the things that we've talked about. It's a complicated question to answer. It's not like, hey, I have the best quarterback in the league. I'm going to give that guy $60 million a year, and we'll just have to figure out how to structure it. But we're going to give you this, and we're going to agree on the guaranteed money. Now let's figure out how to piece it together from there. It's a little bit more concrete in that sense. But when you incorporate other positions, and this is where the Travis Hunter contract extension, when that comes, I am so fascinated to see how they manifest. Number one wide receiver in the game. What is Jamar Chase making? Like $35.1 million a year? The number one cornerback? So Derek Stingley's making 30. The next best corner is making 25. So how much of an anomaly is that Derek Stingley Jr. contract? Because cornerback all of a sudden shot up within the course of 9 months from 21 million to 30? How artificially inflated is that number? We had that same question with Justin Jefferson initially, because it went from 30 to 35 in the blink of an eye. But things leveled out. Jamar Chase is making more than Justin Jefferson now. CeeDee Lamb's making 34. So that is not an inflated number. But is it going to be inflated at corner? I can't wait. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want to watch 3 years of football. But when that contract comes around, how is he going to get paid? I think that's going to be one of the more fascinating discussions of NFL contracts, maybe ever, if he's still playing both sides of the ball. Oh, that's going to be interesting. But let's wrap it up because we've gone over an hour now. Specialists, Will Reichard, Ryan Wright, Andrew DePaula. I don't have anything to say except if a good punter gets cut, the Vikings may replace Ryan Wright. They are not attached to him. And that's it.
It's good. Good show.
Yeah.
And the whole discussion on Metellus is fascinating because it is complicated. It's not as easy. And as Northvia says, Brian Flores helped make Metellus.
Mm-hmm.
Because he started out as a special teamer. But he saw something in Metellus and has brought that out. So it's great. Now, tomorrow night, we're having a special here on Vikings First and SKOL. It's going to be Skoling with Friends. I'm having the one and only Vocal Vike, Mr. Rapp, on, and we're going to be talking to all sorts of Vikings football and raising some money for his dad's cancer fight. So I asked everybody that's here tonight to join us again tomorrow night, same time, St. Pat Saddle, 6:05 Central. We start.
Bingo. Be there. Be there or be Odie. And by be Odie, I mean sleep in a dog bed. Just be there. It'll be a fun time. Thank you guys so much. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, because you never know when we are going to be able to go live and have a really nice conversation. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff over the course of the next month. And then training camp, we're going to have a lot of good stuff. It's going to be a good time. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!